Maggie, you must be talking about none other than the Max Carraro, one of my favorite people on planet Earth and one of the best MS doctors I've ever trained. We have 2 minutes until we go live. I'll bring River Tan online, Ben. She is an American Mastiff and the love of my life. Darla is set. Julie's showing love. Maggie's in the house. Come on, guys, get ready with the flames. 1 minute left. Flame it up, yo. Show love. Flame up the chat. You know how to do it. Show me love. Let's get the whole chat flamed up. Chicago's in the house. Lil has got the flames going on. Violet Wonder has got it going on. Oh, yeah, there we go. Flames everywhere. London, Ontario in the house. Moments until we get started. Oh, look at it go, look at it go. Flames and flames. John Foley representing 20 years in service. Look at that. Lemon peel angelfish. It is live. I can feel the heat. I can feel the heat. We have less than a minute left until we go live. Let's get it ready. Australia representing. Jen McGraw showing flames. Joe Ellen showing flames. Woo-wee! Rachel Stent not joking around. Doug showing flames. Mike Victor's got flames. Marla Hopkins, what's up, lady, has got flames. Woo! I am so excited to be here with you guys. Howdy do, Aaron Boster here. This is our March 2023 live stream. Check out the wanted poster right behind me. My team made that for me. Thank you so much for the flames. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight. There is already 143 of you that have jumped online, and that is unbelievable. We are joined by some fantastic moderators, and they're going to help us tonight. Thank you so much. If you like what we're doing tonight, definitely throw some flames in the chat and show love. And if you have occasion to jump out of the chat, give it a thumbs up and jump right back in. That teaches the YouTube algorithm that what we're doing is worthwhile and helps push out this content so more people can find it. Now, if you haven't noticed, I sound like a frog tonight. I've got a little bit of a laryngitis. I'll be very honest with you. It doesn't hurt. It just sounds like I can't talk. So I apologize in advance for my voice. I've got my water at the ready. When I drink, you drink. MS Water Challenge. Let's get it done, guys. That's delicious. Got a little lime in there. I'm loving that. And we've got a lot of fun things planned for tonight. I want to start off by sharing with you a really, really exciting update. So March 18th, 2020, the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis went live. We opened our doors to families impacted by MS from around the globe, and it's been one heck of a ride. Now, through our evolution, we have been optimizing various aspects of our clinic, and today our newly updated website went live. So I'm going to ask everyone on the line right now to do me a kind favor. All 173 of you lovely, lovely human beings. I want you to go over to my website. What's up, 4QMS? How are you, my friend? Do me a favor and go to bosterms.com. Right now, open up a different browser, go to bosterms.com, and check out the website. We've been working on it for months and months and months. I am so proud of the content. I'm so excited to share it with you. So go check out bosterms.com. If you want to leave a comment, I would be grateful. If you want to leave a question, let me know. If you have some feedback, let me know. But I'm really, really excited. You know, we take care of families impacted by MS from around the globe. And a good portion of what we try to do is outreach and optimizing people's lives to live their very best life despite MS. And that doesn't just happen in the clinic. That happens outside the clinic. And so that website is so important to me. So do me a kind favor and check out the website. Let me know kind of what you think. And I will be very, very excited to get your feedback. So that's brand new. That literally launched this afternoon. I'm very, very excited to bring you that right now. Even so it as well writes, don't forget to give a thumbs up under the video. You got to jump out of the chat, then jump back in. That's a way to show love. It teaches the YouTube algorithm that you really like this content. Now, in preparation for tonight, I have not planned a didactic lecture. It is not my intention to give a didactic lecture tonight. On the contrary, thank you very much, Michael. On the contrary, it's my goal tonight to answer your questions. However, on Monday of this week, so 2 days ago, I did put out a pretty inflammatory video. I put out a video anticipating that I was going to get a lot of heat. It's a video about when do you stop treatment in treating older people impacted by MS. Now, I was hopeful that you guys would be willing to watch that video with me. And I'm going to try to arrange the screen so we can put it up there. As we're watching the video, I want you guys to fill the chat with your comments. And then when we're done with the video, I'm going to focus on that video and I want to receive your chats and questions and comments. So let's try to do that now. I've got to try to be somewhat creative. And so bear with me while I try to make this work. Okay, guys, let's see how this is going to work.
Are you too old to be treated for your multiple sclerosis?
Can you hear that?
That's what we're going to talk about in this video. The contentious topic of aging and multiple sclerosis. Now, warning ahead of time, I have some very strong opinions. But if you want to hear them, don't turn away, because that starts right now. Hey! Howdy! Thanks for learning about MS with me, Aaron Boster. In this video, I'm going to be discussing a hot topic, one that I have a lot of emotions surrounding. So I'll warn you ahead of time that I may rant a little bit. I want to discuss the topic of aging in the setting of multiple sclerosis. Or otherwise stated, how do we help manage people impacted by MS as they get older? It's not a straightforward topic. It hasn't been adequately studied, and presently there's an ongoing and raging debate amongst MS neurologists like myself about what we should be doing. There's largely two camps. There's a group of neurologists that for some reason feel that when you reach a certain chronologic age, that you age out of MS treatment and you can come off your therapy. There's another group of neurologists who don't agree with that, and they feel that the better part of valor is to continue to treat. Now, I'm extremely biased, and I'm going to share my perspective and opinions. And let's jump in. So where is this debate coming from? Well, I think it's born out of the idea that as an individual human ages, their immune system becomes quieter. Now, I'm not talking about when you're 30 and 40 and 50. I was taught that the immune system gets quieter in your late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the idea is, as your immune system becomes quieter, something we called immunosenescence, your autoimmune condition might quiet down. And so maybe you don't need to be treated in that scenario. Moreover, the medicines that we've developed to treat multiple sclerosis are largely tested in relatively young people with relatively new diagnoses. And so we don't have ironclad data about how these medicines play out in someone who's 60 or 70. For all of these reasons, some MS neurologists, in my opinion inappropriately, will say, okay, well, if you've been stable and you're not having any new disease activity and you're not progressing in your disability, well, then maybe we can take you off that medicine and you're gonna do just fine. I don't agree. When this has been studied, I'm struck that a percentage of patients who are taken off medicine, upwards of a third, go on to progress in neurological disability. They get worse when they're taken off medicines. That makes me really, really frustrated. Real quick before we go on, do me a kind favor. If you like this video, would you give it a thumbs up? Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Those two actions teach the YouTube algorithm that you like my content and help push it out so more people impacted by MS can benefit. Thank you. Now, it is true that the risk of having a new MS attack and the risk of having a new enhancing lesion on your MRI decreases as you get older. So a 30-something with MS is much more likely to have frequent attacks than a 60-something. But the 60-something who has an attack is less likely to bounce back. So the 30-something might be taking an MS disease-modifying therapy as a so-called insurance policy against attacks. The 60-year-old is doing the same thing, because even though it's less likely, they're more severe and less likely to bounce back when they occur. It's a different kind of insurance policy, but it's still super important. Moreover, MS medicines do a lot more than just stop inflammation, new attacks, and contrast-enhancing lesions. These medicines, particularly some of the newer medicines, can slow disability progression. They slow the disease down, separate from their impact on relapses. And that is super duper important. As people with MS age, they have an increased risk of progression of neurological disability. Wouldn't they like to be on something to help with that? Of course they would. Disease-modifying therapies deserve to be used in people with MS, even if they're a little older. When I'm asked at what age I stop treating, I have a very definite age. I do not treat past death. If you die, I'm not going to treat you anymore for your multiple sclerosis. I can't get the drugs paid for. I can't get approved through your insurance. I can't get it in your body. I can't get the drug to circulate. Nothing works. So I feel very, very comfortable putting a line in the sand at death. I'm not going to treat you at that point. However, if you are alive and if you have neurological features that you like things that you enjoy doing, like seeing or smelling or eating or having an orgasm or doing a crossword puzzle or going for a walk, those are all neurological functions. If you have any of those that you like, I want to help you maintain them. And if you have an autoimmune condition, multiple sclerosis, which risks attacking the holiest of holies, the supercomputer that runs the body, the brain, and the superhighway that takes all that information from the brain down to your feet and back up, well, gosh, I want to do something to help you keep that at bay so your immune system leaves your nervous system alone. And I will continue to treat you. It has been my anecdotal experience as I receive some patients who have been taken off medicines from other doctors, and they come to see me, and when you listen, they're not doing well. They are progressing. They're having increased difficulty getting through their daily activities and walking, etc., and it makes me super sad. And I think that we need to avoid ageism in multiple sclerosis. Now, whereas I do not agree with stopping therapy, I do agree with changing the therapy as we get a little bit older. And I've made some videos on this channel about the concepts of de-escalation. I'm not going to go through that all right now, but I'll throw a link up here so you can click that card and check it out later. Suffice it to say that largely the jury is still out, and there is an ongoing debate. So as data comes in, I'll be very excited to share it with you. But as of right now, this MS treater in Central Ohio is going to keep on keeping on. I'm going to avoid being ageist, and I'm going to treat people impacted by MS agnostic to their age so I can help them live their very best life. If you'd like to learn more about MS treatment, click the video that's on your screen right now. And until my next Monday morning video or my next monthly live stream, or even better,
Oops. Okay. Thank you, guys. I don't know what I would do without you. I would have talked for an hour and nobody would have heard me. I'm so sorry about that. I forgot to turn the audio back on. Thank you very much for allowing me to share that video with you. That's a video that I put out on Monday. I make a video every Monday morning. I've done that since 2015. And this week's video was pretty darn contentious. I was talking about treating people even if they're a little older. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic. If you are watching it for the first time or the seventh time for that matter, leave a comment about your thoughts. I'm a very strong believer that we treat until death, and as long as you have a nervous system with features that you like, boy, I want to keep treating it. I really feel strongly about that. And so I'll look forward to reading your comments later. While we were getting the video up and running, one of our fantastic moderators, Joe Siders, joined the chat. Everyone give a hello, howdy, hi to Joe. He's a great guy. Joe, it's great to see you. MS Water Challenge. When I drink, you drink. Let's do it. Oh yeah, digging that. Okay, MS Ask Me Anything AMA. Let's switch it up. I've got my little dragon here who's going to help us out, and I am excited to answer your questions. So fire away. I'm going to take questions in order, and I'm going to try to answer everything that I can. If I don't get to it in time, thank you very much. If I don't get to it in time, then please don't fret. I will answer the questions later in a follow-up video. So Mason says that he's a patient of Dr. Mark Friedman in Canada. He seems to think there's nothing to give me after Limtrada since I no longer have active MS. So first of all, you have a very, very good MS neurologist. So Mark Friedman, I consider a work friend. He and I have served on committees together, and he's quite a guy. I think that the fact that he gave you Limtrada and that he's following you is really encouraging information. I'll disagree very slightly. I don't think that Limtrada means that you can never receive other therapy. I think that we have to constantly reevaluate if things are working or not. Really great question. The next question comes from Candy C, and she writes, if I can make my computer work so that I can see the screen. Oops, sorry guys. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm flubbing around. Here we are. Candy C writes, I hope you're able to get to my question about your opinion on someone diagnosed with lesions in the brain and the brain stems, the cervical spine and thoracic spine. It freaks me out. So now, as you know, I can't give you a diagnosis. I can't treat you on the interwebs because I don't have enough information. And so as you ask me questions, it's important that I can frame the question in a general way so that everyone can benefit. So let's try to do that now. I'm asking a question about someone who's diagnosed and has lesions, not just in the top of their brain, but also in the bottom of their brain and in their spine. And not just their cervical spine, but their thoracic spine. So let's deconstruct this after we drink a sip of water. So when you have multiple sclerosis, the disease can impact the entire central nervous system. The brain, the supercomputer that runs the body, the holiest of holies, and the spinal cord, the superhighway that takes the information from the brain to your feet and then back up. And where you have damage matters as far as prognosis is concerned. It turns out that if all of your lesions are at the top of your brain, that's better prognostically. It turns out that if you have lesions at the base of the brain, that's worse prognostically. So if you have lesions in the brainstem, that is a worse prognosis than if you don't. And if you have lesions in the spine, that is probably the worst prognosis of all three spots. So here we have a situation where someone is being diagnosed with MS, and at the time of diagnosis, they have lesions, not just in their brain, but also in their cervical and the thoracic spine. And so in that situation, what do we do with that information? And they share that it freaks them out. And I understand that. What I will share with you is that that is a bad prognostic feature, but it doesn't mean gloom and doom. It doesn't mean that you should, buy your funeral home ahead of time and get your casket set up because you're not long for this world. That's simply not true. And even though it is a bad prognostic factor, I translate that into I need to be more aggressive. I need to be more on point in the way that I treat your disease. So when I meet someone and they're newly diagnosed and they have lesions in their brain, their C and their T-spine, I'm not freaked out, but I bring a SWAT team to a knife fight. And I'm going to write that down. I want to bring a SWAT team to a knife fight. Because I don't want to fight a knife fight. I don't know how to fight with a knife. I get cut. I want 12 guys in front of me that look like G.I. Joe with muscles on top of their muscles. And they're going to have flak jackets and semi-automatic weapons, and they're going to stand there, and I'm going to stand behind them with my fist raised, one finger out, and that's how I'm going to treat your MS. I want to bring a SWAT team to a knife fight. That was a great question. Thank you for asking it. Now let's jump back into the discussion. I'm going to scroll up looking for where I left off. Candy said that she couldn't hear. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, well, I hope that you can hear it on the replay. Let's take a look and see where the next question is. Here's a question from, let's see, from Mark. And Mark has an awesome a mustache. That's fantastic, my friend. Spasticity and sleep. Any thoughts? They don't complement each other very well. You are 100% correct. Now let's break this down. Mark's question, by the way, is a very, very relevant question. The reason that it's a relevant question is because many, many people impacted by MS suffer from fatigue and spasticity. And when they sleep, the spasticity gets worse. Let me break this down for you. Spasticity is a situation where muscles don't cooperate. All right, I'm trying to move the screen around a little bit. Let's see here. This is why I'm not going to quit my day job. All right, so spasticity is a situation, and I'll use my massive arm as an example. When I want to bring my hand to my head, my massive bicep, this giant muscle has to go, it has to contract. My tricep has to relax because the function of the tricep is to extend the arm. I want to bring the arm this way, so I have to let this muscle go. I don't choose to do that. My spinal cord does it for me. I just say, beer, and then I bring the glass to my lips. And the spinal cord turns off the tricep. In the setting of MS, when there's been damage to the brain and spinal cord, the message to the tricep doesn't get there. So when you want to bring your hand like this, you also want to bring your hand like that. And the result is a tug of war across your own arm, or your leg, or your hip, or your back, or wherever. And spasticity is always worse under two conditions. So Mark, when you are sleeping, you're probably still because you're not moving. Just like when someone is sitting, they're not moving. And the longer you stay still, the stiffer you will get. Spasticity literally gets worse with stillness. So the very worst time is when you're sleeping. Now, I live in Columbus, Ohio. It's actually not that terrible out today. You can see behind me, it's kind of pretty outside, but normally it's really cold. And cold ambient temperatures worsen spasticity. So I don't know where you live, Mark, but if you live near where I live, or if you live in the northern hemisphere and it's wintertime and you're sleeping, it's a setup for spasticity. And there's a high likelihood that you're going to wake up with spasms, cramps, Charlie horses, limbs that are hard to bend. So what do you do about it? What can you do about spasticity, particularly in the evenings when you're sleeping? Well, let me share with you a couple tricks that I find to be very, very helpful. But before I do that, MS Water Challenge, yo. When I drink, you drink. Drink up, guys. So when you're trying to combat spasticity at night, there are two tricks that I want to use. Number one, I want you to stretch. When you enter your bedroom and you put on your PJs and you're ready to get in bed, before you climb in bed, get on the floor and stretch out. Stretch out your back, your butt, your hamstrings. Stretch out your quadriceps and your calves. Spend 30 seconds holding each position. So if you're stretching, you gotta count to 30. That's a really long time. And I might do a couple repetitions. If you stretch out before bedtime, before you climb in bed, what you will find is that you have a lot less spasms, spasticity, cramps, Charlie horses, a lot less of these things when it's actually time for sleeping. And I really want that for you. So I would strongly encourage you to stretch before you go to bed. That's number one. Number two is using medicine. And so there are medicines and supplements that can help with spasticity. If you want to go the medicine route, then I would consider taking a medicine called baclofen. Baclofen is an oral antispasmodic. It gives you the neurotransmitter you're missing, GABA, and it relaxes the triceps so that they're not fighting each other. That works in the legs. And taking some baclofen prior to bedtime can be very, very helpful. Another medicine that we use very commonly is Xanaflex, tizanidine. So those are two medicines that can be very helpful. If you are inclined to go the supplement route as opposed to the medicine route, then we could use magnesium oxide. So mag oxide, 400 milligrams, is a very good supplement to help with spasticity. or cannabis. THC and CBD are very helpful at helping with spasticity at nighttime. So I have many patients, before bedtime, they will stretch, they will use a tincture of cannabis and a baclofen, and then they go to sleep, no spasms at night. That was a great question. There are 204 of you who have jumped online. I'm blown away by that. Thank you so very much for the love. That's amazing. You know, when I started this channel years and years ago, I was upset that a patient no-showed to my clinic visit. That's why I started my channel. So a patient no-showed, and I thought, man, I was so excited to talk to them, and now I don't get to talk to them. I'm just gonna talk to my phone. So I literally just like recorded some stuff on my phone, and then I uploaded it to YouTube. I used to joke and say like it's Ray Charles. I just load it up. Now we fast forward many, many years, and I'm a strong believer that this is a really, really special opportunity to amass a group of people that are like-minded to really help each other, support each other. And when I say #WeHaveMS, that's really what I'm referencing. So that was a great question. Thank you for that. And thank you for 208 of you that have jumped online. Let's go to the next question. So Southern Dove writes in and says, can a person have a lesion on their spine but not on the brain? If so, how common is this? It's not that uncommon. It's really not that uncommon. So when we have multiple sclerosis, we look for lesions in multiple locations. So we look for lesions in the brain, and there's 4 different locations in the brain. And we also look for lesions in the spine. Now, is it common that someone presents and only has spine lesions? No, that's not common, but it can happen. And sometimes what's more common is that a given individual human with MS has an MS that happens to have a predilection towards the cord. So they have some lesions in the brain, maybe not a bunch, but they have some, but their cord is very seriously affected. And you will notice, and I will notice in my clinic, that I see that a lot more in people with primary progressive MS. People with primary progressive MS have lesions in their brain, but not anywhere near to the degree they have lesions in their spine. So that's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. So I really like this question. This is a question, I'm not going to be able to pronounce your name, Lakita. So if I butchered your name, Lakita, I apologize. But I really like your question. It's a really, really good question. And I'm going to answer it as soon as I drink some water. So MS Water Challenge, yo, when I drink, you drink. Oh, that's good. So if I have MS, am I going to end up disabled? If I have MS, am I going to end up in a wheelchair? If I have MS, am I going to end up using a cane? These are very, very real questions. And so, Lakita, thank you for asking them. So it is not a foregone conclusion that everyone with MS is going to end up with a cane. It is not a foregone conclusion that everyone with MS is going to end up with a wheelchair. Now, I want you guys to do an internet search for me, okay? Look up the patient-determined disease step, the PDDS. The PDDS is, you can look this up online, all right? Just do a Google search. And the PDDS is a table, it looks like a rainbow, where you match 2 elements, your neurological exam and how long you've had MS. And when I say neurological examination, I mean your EDSS, or your responses to a bunch of questions about how you're doing. If you complete the PDDS and you look at the number, the length of time that you've had MS, you can look at the table and it will give you a sense of the severity of your disease. And it will compare the severity of your disease compared to other people. And as you're getting used to a new diagnosis of MS, I actually think that's very, very relevant. It's very, very helpful. Now I'm going to scroll back up in hopes of finding where I left off. I know that I've only begun to answer questions. Let's see. All right, so I'm just going to start here with Ren E. Berry's question. Ren E. Berry has been a long-time viewer, a long-time participator on this channel, and I consider Ren E. Berry to be a friend. Now, I've never met Ren E. Berry, but I look for Ren E. Berry's comments on my channel, and I love seeing them. And so thank you very much for being here tonight. Question: Has time of day been studied for infusion induction effectiveness? Not to my knowledge. I am not familiar with taking it early or taking it later having a difference in efficacy. And if I had to guess, I would guess that it would not have a bearing on efficacy. It might have a bearing on tolerability, however. If you take the drug later in the day as compared to earlier in the day, I do think that could have an aspect. Now, this is a great question from Scott Johnson. I really like this question, and I like it so much I'm going to change up the scene. Ha-ha! And the question is, can lesions on the brain cause personality changes? And the answer is yes. So there are certain centers of the brain which house personality, right? So a lot of the frontal cortices, the stuff up here, can be involved in your personality. And if you have lesions in those areas, yes, it can change your personality. There's a phenomenon in MS which is called social cognition. Social cognition is your ability to read someone else. Like, if I'm talking to you and I'm standing like this, I'm fine. Well, you know that I'm not fine because my body language, my nonverbals is teaching you that. And social isolation, in the setting of multiple sclerosis, you can have a problem with social cognition. And so I actually remember very vividly my Uncle Mark, who had MS. Towards the end of his life, he wasn't able to pick up social cues, and he would appear rude because he wasn't able to pick up that someone was trying to talk to him or that he should make eye contact or things like that. And I remember as a young man thinking that my uncle was impolite. He was not impolite. My uncle was suffering from personality changes associated with MS. And so that is a thing, and that has been well documented. Now, Angela, who is a fantastic moderator and a wonderful human being, writes a question. Now, this was actually a question that she forwarded from Lil. So, doctor, any studies on CBG for MS? Your opinion on its potential benefits. So, what the hey is CBG? So, the question involves cannabinoids. So let me back up a little bit. So right here I have a beautiful spider plant. This is a spider plant that my mother gave me. I absolutely adore it. Thanks, Mom. And there's a plant that's very popular. You may have heard of it, you may not have. It's called cannabis. So the cannabis plant is a plant that grows ubiquitously almost in any climate. And it makes chemicals. And these chemicals are called cannabinoids. So the cannabis plant makes cannabinoids. And a cannabis plant has hundreds of cannabinoid chemicals, all kinds of different chemicals. MS Water Challenge, yo. So amongst the chemicals, the cannabinoids in the cannabis plant, some of them are rather familiar to you. So you've probably heard of some of these. There's THC. Which I spelled it wrong, THC. Let's try that. Now, THC is the most predominant cannabinoid in the cannabis plant, and it binds to CB1 receptors, which are found in the brain, and can cause you to feel medicated, or it can have psychoactive properties. There's another cannabinoid, which is very common. It's actually the second most common. It's CBD. So CBD is a cannabinoid that binds to the CB2 receptor. It does not bind to CB1 receptors in the brain, and CBD has no psychoactive effects. It can't make you medicated, or as we used to say in high school, high. And so CBD and THC, although they're both chemicals in the cannabis plant, are very, very different, and they have very different functions. CBD helps with inflammation and with pain and with anxiety. At least that's been my experience, without making you impaired. And so I actually recommend CBD to a lot of patients because I think it can be really helpful. Look, there's 219 people. That's amazing. I don't know that we've ever had 219 people on this live stream ever. So thank you all very much for being here tonight. Wow. Now, the question is not about THC. The question is not about CBD. It's about CBG. So what the heck is CBG? CBG is another cannabinoid. It has not been studied very well. And there's anecdotal evidence that CBG might help with various aspects of anxiety and other aspects of inflammation, but it hasn't been studied very much. And so some cannabis distributors or dispensaries or even cannabis doctors may suggest CBG as being one of the new things. I have yet to see data on the topic. It's really anecdotal, but it doesn't mean that it's not useful. And I think as we study cannabis, we become smarter and smarter and increasingly able to help families. And I think that's just really, really awesome. So I kind of like that. I'm trying to move this around here. Let's see if I can. Nope, I guess I can't. All right, let's go to another question. Bluthton. All right. So my buddy Bluthton's got a question. Let's change out the scene. We'll just do it this way. And the question is, are you comfortable prescribing Limtrada as first-line therapy? If you want to send a SWAT team to a knife fight, could you use the nuclear option be better? Bluthton, that's a great question, friend. Thank you for asking it. Am I comfortable using Limtrada first line? Yes. Now, Limtrada, in my opinion, is the most effective disease-modifying therapy that's on the market. And the only thing more effective than Limtrada, in my experience, is a stem cell transplant. And I am of the opinion that Limtrada is much, much safer than a stem cell transplant. So if I, Aaron, had MS, I would give myself Limtrada. I would not do a stem cell transplant. Now, I do want to share that in the great United States of America, the very ultimately wise American FDA has suggested that Limtrada not be used first line because of the safety. And I understand that in the majority of patients, but every once in a while there's a patient who has extremely severe disease and merits Limtrada up front. And so that's a great question. Now I'm going to change it up and we're going to switch questions to Silas. And Silas asks the following question. Whoops, if I can make my screen work here. Sorry, guys. So I had a question about Mavenclad for treatment. Prescriber information says to take immune system modifying drugs into account, do steroids modify the count? That's a good question. So Mavenclad is a really, really effective medicine to treat multiple sclerosis. It's a really good medicine. And Mavenclad is an immunosuppressant. So when you take Mavenclad, it temporarily drops your counts and then brings them back up. And so they suggest that you don't stack immunosuppression. They weren't talking about steroids. When you take steroids for MS and you take a short course of steroids, there's no long-term immunosuppression effect. And so if somebody needs Mavenclad and they need steroids for MS, that's all good in the hood. Now, you are asking about steroids more like for asthma. And I do not think that's a deal breaker. And I have treated patients with Mavenclad who have taken Advair for their asthma and they do fine, and I don't view that as a problem. But the reason is important, and it's because the amount of steroids in Advair is very, very little. And so I don't really view that as a big, serious concern. Excellent question. Thanks for asking. MS Water Challenge with the Snapchat filter. All right. Let's keep on keeping on. Darla, our wonderful moderator, is helping out, and she has a question queued up from Scott Johnston. It says, lesion on the brain cause personality changes. We've answered that. The answer is yes, it can. All right, what else do we have going on? So Green Meadow Honey, that's a cool name. Green Meadow Honey, I like that. Asks, can hormones impact MS symptoms? And the answer is, wow, yes. Yes, 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 big time yes. So let's change the scene up a little bit. Maybe we'll jump over here and we'll answer your question about hormones impacting MS. So interestingly, women have a lot of fluctuations in hormones. So around 11 to 13, when you go through the changes and you start to have your menstrual cycle, there's a monthly phenomenon where you raise up your estrogen, then it comes back down. And then you raise up your estrogen, and it comes back down. And so that's going on while your progesterone is doing the opposite. And so you have hormones that every month are changing. And each time hormones change, it can actually make MS symptoms uptick. It's worse than that because during pregnancy, it can impact the MS, where the pregnancy makes the MS quieter and quieter during the second and third trimester, then it makes it tick up after the baby's born. And during menopause, so when you have a gal around 45 to 55, somewhere in there, and they're starting to have menopause changes, you can see an uptick of MS symptoms. Now, this is not something that we have to take laying down. And I have helped many women navigate their monthly menstrual cycle as follows. I put them on a birth control pill, and we don't take the placebo. So normally when you take a birth control pill, an oral birth control pill, you're taking a pill a day for most of the month. And then at the end of the month, come here, let me see if I can get this kitty cat to come on stage here. Hi, meow meow. And then at the end of the month, you take the placebos, and then you'll have a menstrual cycle. So if you don't take the placebos, then you don't menstruate. And so one of the things that we can do in MS, and of course we need permission from the OB-GYN or from the primary care, make sure everybody's on the same page. I'm not just suggesting you just randomly do this with your neurologist, but we will take the active pills for birth control, and we won't take the placebo except once every 3 months. And so we skip 2 periods, and then we only have 1 period every 3 months. And that's a way of decreasing the annoyance, the frustration, the uptick of MS symptoms. Now, this is Mewtwo. So Mewtwo is my son's ragdoll cat, and he is quite a little monster. He's pretty cute. The only downside of Mewtwo is that if you leave a towel on the floor, he will pee on it. And when you consider that my son is 16 and leaves his towel on the floor, then I do a lot of laundry. All right, let's see what the next question is. Let's see here. So Christopher asks, what's your take on stem cells? So I've talked a lot about stem cells on this channel periodically, and this is a very appropriate question because it's a very contemporary thing that's going on. So it looks like, amongst other ways of treating MS, if you do a hard reboot, you remove the immune response through chemotherapy and radiation, so the person would die, but before they die, you give them stem cells to rebuild their immune system. That could help a lot with MS. Now, stem cell transplantation is not prime time, but it is becoming increasingly more and more accepted for aggressive MS. And we talked about Mark Friedman earlier. Mark did some really interesting studies looking at stem cell transplantation in Canada. In England, they now have stem cell transplantation as part of the NHS, available for highly active patients with MS. Here in the United States, there are ongoing clinical trials looking at stem cell transplantation. It's not prime time. It's not for everybody. And I am not a fan of stem cell tourism, where you travel to an exciting, exotic place like India or Chicago, and then you have a stem cell transplant. I don't think it's prime time yet. The other thing that I would like to share with you on this call today is that when you look at the way a stem cell transplant helps you, it may not be the way that you think. The removing the immune system, the giving the lethal doses of chemotherapy and radiation is actually what helps the MS. The stem cells don't help the MS, they just prevent you from dying. And I want you to think about that. It's not the stem cell that we believe is helping you. It's the ablation. It's the rough and rugged destroying your naughty immune response. It's not the stem cell. The stem cell is just making sure that you don't succumb to infection. So that's a very appropriate question. Thank you for asking it. You know, if you guys look right now, look up in the corner, there's 131 of you, and that's phenomenal. You know, I am so touched by this growing global online community, and the fact that you will give up time in your evenings or morning or afternoon or wherever it is in the world right now so that we could get together and up our games is really, really awesome, and I super appreciate that. So thank you very much. MS Water Challenge. When I drink, you drink, yo. All right, so here's a question from Ivan. Ivan says, what are your thoughts on the new Tysabri injection versus Tysabri infusion? I'm being asked to switch. So There's a high likelihood that Ivan does not live in the United States because what Ivan is referencing is sub-Q Tysabri, which is not approved in the US. It's approved in Europe. And so my suspicion is that Ivan is in Europe somewhere. And here in the US, it was not approved, and so I don't have any personal experience. Now, I don't want to be a naysayer and say you shouldn't take sub-Q Tysabri because I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently. What I can say is that IV Tysabri works really well, and if you have an option between the two, I can understand why you might say, hey man, can I take the stuff I've been taking? I'm not really able to talk too much about it just because it's not been made available here in the US. And so I would be very curious what my friends at Bart's MS in England have to say about it. So Darla, our wonderful moderator, is helping out, and she posts a question from Green Meadow Honey. Can hormones impact MS? The answer is yes. We definitely talked about that. All right. So Nomad Joe says, how do you request medical records? Do you use Epic Medical Records? So Epic is probably the most advanced electronic medical record used in the United States. And I am an Epic super user. I worked at an academic institution where I was very involved in launching Epic. And then I moved to a different institution where I was very involved in launching Epic, and I love Epic. When I started the Boster Center for MS, I called Epic. I said, hey, Epic, it's Aaron. Do you think I could use your product? And they laughed, and they said, well, it's about $20 million because most of Epic is for big healthcare systems. So I don't have Epic anymore. I miss Epic because it's really nice. Our electronic medical record is also very nice. It's called eClinicalWorks, and I think it's superb. And when we need to request medical records, there's a couple ways to do it. You can sign a medical records release to us, and then we can ask the hospital to fax us your records. Or you're the human being who is in charge. You can call the hospital and say, send me a copy of the records, and they'll mail you a copy of your medical records. Now, some hospitals may charge a couple dollars for the records. Most don't. And it's really, really important for continuity of care. Now, if two institutions both have Epic, then they can share between them. If two institutions both have eClinicalWorks, the one I use, they can share in between them. And so there are ways to do that. If you would like to check things out, or if you're asking because you'd like to visit us, I'm going to add our phone number in the chat. It's 614-304-3444, and that's in the United States. So give a holler, and you can ask my administration team to help you get your records pulled together. And we would be happy to help you do that. So the next question comes from Jay. I can't pronounce your name. I apologize. This question is asking about spasticity and why is spasticity worse than the cold? And my honest answer is I don't know. I'm not sure physiologically why it's worse. I know it's worse because I live in Ohio where it gets really cold and my patients struggle during the winters with increased spasticity, but I actually don't know physiologically the reason why. Sorry. So Marla Hopkins, who is an amazing human being, someone that I adore, she writes in and says, how do I know when to change disease-modifying therapy? So I would change a disease-modifying therapy under 5 conditions. Condition number 1 is you have an attack while on the drug. Number 2 is you have new MRI spots on the drug. Number 3 is that the drug is no longer safe or well tolerated, because the safety can change over time, or your ability to tolerate the drug can change over time. And so maybe that's like 3 and 4, because I said 2. And the last one would be if we find something that works better. So you're not married to your disease-modifying therapy. You're dating your disease-modifying therapy. And if the disease-modifying therapy is treating you like a lady, great. But if it starts to act up, we're going to kick it to the curb. So Deb Lacey was told some shenanigans, which I think is ageism. She was told, oh, honey, you don't need to be treated because you're 60. Well, my mom's older than 60, and if she had MS, I would treat her. And it's true that when you're 60, you're less likely to have disease activity, but you can still have disease activity. It's true that when you're 60, you're going to have less attacks, but it's also true that you're less likely to bounce back. And so I think that's nonsensical. Now, doctors are like plumbers. There's a bunch of us. We all have opinions. And if you hired a plumber to come into your house and install a sink that you had purchased, and the plumber started to give you a hard time and tell you, honey, you don't want the sink there, you want it over there, you would show the plumber the door and say, bye-bye, and then you'd find another plumber. Doctors are like plumbers. MS Water Challenge, yo. All right. What else we got going on? So Darla says, please don't quit your day job. I'm not going to quit my day job. I don't know how to do much else. You know, it's a gift that I get to help people impacted by MS. It really is truly a gift to me. When I can help you live your best life, it fills a bucket for me. And I hopscotch through your life. I do this with you. So when the good stuff happens, I can celebrate with you. And I do celebrate with you. When the bad stuff happens, I cry with you because it sucks. And I'm really honored that I get to be on this journey with you guys. Thank you. So Lane writes, I found out that coconut water helps spasms. Any tips for this? Any reason why? Well, hydration helps spasticity, so staying hydrated can help. And coconut water has sodium and other salts in it, and so that can help. And so it's not surprising to me, particularly if you were dehydrated, that coconut water can help. I do want to give you a precaution. I discovered coconut water years ago, and I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. And I started to drink a lot of coconut water. I mean, like a lot. Like I wasn't drinking normal water, I was only drinking coconut water. And then I noticed that I had profound diarrhea, and I didn't know why until I learned that coconut water is a diuretic, and it can cause diarrhea. And so I think coconut water is awesome, but I would be careful about drinking too much so that you don't have the same problem that I had. All right, what else do we have here? So here's a question that our moderator, Angela, was kind enough to set up for us. And the question, brain volume isn't mentioned in the MRI report. Does this mean it's not an issue, or are they not even looking? That's a really good question. So measuring the volume or the size of someone's brain is very relevant in multiple sclerosis. It's actually a very relevant thing to do because in the setting of MS, brains can shrink faster than we would like them to. They can actually shrink a lot faster than we would like them to. And so measuring the size of the noggin and measuring brain volume, I think is very important. But most MRI scanners can't do it. You have to have a scanner that is set up in a special way so there's no gaps because you have to have 100% coverage of the entire brain, no skipping. And you have to have special software to measure the brain volume. So for example, when I image a patient, I do a brain volume analysis with every MRI of the brain because I think it's super important. But if a scanner is not set up to measure brain volume, you can't really go backwards and then do a brain volume assessment very easily. So this is the kind of thing that I think all MS neurologists should be doing, right? But I'm still in the minority, and unfortunately, most MS neurologists are not measuring brain volume. Now, before a neurologist says, well, I can't do that, that must be some academic center. Nuh-uh, that's not true, because I get this done through a commercial product called the NeuroQuant. And the NeuroQuant is something that we simply added to the MRI scanner, and it gives us really, really awesome volumetric images. So here's a question from Michelle, if I can get it to come on the screen. Just diagnosed with MS, have 21 lesions. Can you start having seizures? How do you know what type you have? How many lesions are on the corpus? Most of my lesions are the corpus callosum. My neurologist says he's not so sure. So as we can imagine, right now, Michelle is drinking from a fire hose, right? Because a new diagnosis can be really, really overwhelming. And so I want to start off by saying, Michelle, welcome. We are here for you. This is an awesome online community. And so thank you so much for jumping in, and thank you for asking your question. Now, it's actually 3 questions. So first off, what does it mean to have 21 lesions? The number of lesions that you develop or that you present with at the time of diagnosis does have a prognostic factor. So having 21 lesions at the time of diagnosis is not as good as only having 2. And so prognostically, that's concerning. Now, the second question is, can you have seizures? And yes, people impacted by MS are 6 times more likely to suffer from a seizure compared to the general population. That does not mean that most patients with MS have seizures. On the contrary, the vast majority do not have seizures. And fortunately, seizures, generally speaking, are very easy to treat. Now, why are your lesions in the corpus callosum? That I'm not so sure about. It's a very common place for people to have MS lesions, but if they're mostly there, I'm not exactly sure why that is. Again, welcome, MS Water Challenge. All right. So Elizabeth Wolf shares a tip and trick that stretching has been one of the best things for her MS. And I agree. I think stretching is really important, particularly my patients that live in the north up here in Ohio. I want you to stretch once when you wake up, once when you go to bed before you climb into bed, and once in the middle of your day. If you can stretch 3 times a day, that can be really, really helpful. So Marcus shares that medical cannabis has really been very helpful, and I am delighted to hear that. Medical cannabis can be very, very helpful. Let's see here. So some other questions are popping up. So Moose asks, can you please elaborate on worse prognosis for C-spine lesions? So yes, I can. So when we're looking at a human with multiple sclerosis, we're trying in part to assess whether or not they are more likely to get worse faster. So whether they're more likely to have frequent MS attacks or whether they're more likely to have progression of neurological disability separate from attacks. And there are certain features in a person who presents with MS which would predispose them to have more or less of a problem. So the cat just ran away. So having spinal cord lesions compared to not having spinal cord lesions is statistically, probabilistically more concerning for worse disease. Someone who has spinal cord lesions is more likely to have more attacks or progression more frequently or faster than those that don't. Does that mean that if you have spinal cord lesions, you're doomed? No. It just means that it's another factor that we have to think about. Very, very important question. Thank you for asking it. So even so, it is well, who I absolutely adore. She's a fantastic person, writes some really, really helpful tips. Yoga pose, legs up the wall, very helpful at bedtime. So I'm not exactly sure what exactly all that entails, and I'm not very stretchable or flexible, but I think any efforts at stretching your lower body prior to sleep is a really, really good idea. So thank you for sharing that with us. Alrighty, so NT says never catches live. I'm so glad that you're here. That's fantastic. You know, if you look, let's see if I can show the screen here. Look at that. There's 239 humans that have jumped online from around the globe. I have never seen that before. I'm blown away. Thank you so very much. It means the world to me. And let's take another question. Traveling with Kesimpta shots. If my plane is postponed a day, will it be okay if I inject a day late? I was told I must inject at the same time. Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be okay. All right, let's look for some more questions. What about tizanidine? Just Chrissy asks. So tizanidine, which is also called Xanaflex, that's the trade name. Tizanidine is a central acting muscle relaxant. It works through different mechanisms than baclofen. Tizanidine works through alpha adrenergic mechanisms, and it can do a really good job of helping with spasticity. It specifically does a really good job looking at treating spasms like cramps, and it's extremely sedating. And so I generally don't give it to people during the daytime because they'd fall asleep at work. Instead, we use it at nighttime. And so I think tizanidine is a really, really good drug. Okay, other questions. Well, here's near and dear to my heart, spasticity and sex. So if you're having intercourse and your leg goes into a spasm, you're no longer having intercourse. If you're having intercourse and your legs cramp shut, you're no longer having intercourse. In fact, some people have such bad spasticity that even opening their legs up to participate in intercourse can be really, really challenging. So what do we do about spasticity in sex? So let's come up with 5 things. Thing number 1 is to talk to your partner. Tell your partner, hey, I have spasticity. And if I am thrusting in this particular manner, I'm going to go into spasms. I can't do that. So I need you to work with me. And if I tell you that a position is starting to cause spasms, you got to let me move. All right. So communication is very, 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 very important. Number 2, make sure you go to the bathroom before you have sex, because a full bladder or being full of stool is going to increase spasticity. Number 3, legit stretch out before intercourse, just like track practice. Get on the ground, stretch out your calves, stretch out your hamstrings, stretch out your back, your butt, your quads. You have to stretch before sex. And I would encourage you to do it with your partner. Say, hey, this is a new type of foreplay, honey. Let's put on our nighty clothes and then get on the floor and we're going to stretch out. Then have sex. What else can you do? Make sure that you're hydrated. All right, so hydration can help decrease spasticity. And I want you to be ongoing in your communication. If you find a position's getting too tough, you got to talk about it. So many people are frustrated in the bedroom, and it's literally stemming from the fact that they're not talking to their partner. Now, in addition to that, we can use medicines to help with spasticity during sex. So we sometimes give people baclofen, Xanaflex, Valium, so that they don't have spasms during sex. And my favorite is a baclofen pump, where we can hit a button and bolus you. Then you can have awesome intercourse without having spasms. It is 7:30. We have been doing this live for an entire hour. There are 236 of you, and I am absolutely blown away. My name is Aaron Boster, and as always, thank you for learning about MS with me. I am committed to helping keep my channel going so that I can continue to educate, energize, and empower families impacted by MS. I want to thank each and every one of you for jumping online tonight. It means the world to me. Thank you so much for the support. You will see my next Monday morning video next Monday, and I will look forward to an April Ask Me Anything live stream the last week of April. Until then, this is Aaron Boster saying be safe and take care and have a fantastic night.